They say sleep is supposed to be the safest place, a pause between days where nothing can touch you. But what if the thing haunting you doesn't wait until you're asleep? What if it feeds on those fragile moments when your mind begins to drift? I learned that truth during one long rain-soaked week in November. The week when the darkness in my apartment stopped sleeping. The first night started with something small. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, hammering against my windows like 1,000 fingertips. I live alone in a third-floor apartment just outside Seattle. Quiet, gray, and cold. My kind of peace. That night, I stayed up late editing photos from a wedding shoot. The only light in the room coming from the soft glow of my monitor. Somewhere around 2:30 a.m., the screen flickered once, then again. Then, the power went out. I sighed, assuming the storm had hit another transformer. But before I could grab my phone flashlight, I heard it. A slow, deliberate scrape, like something dragging across the hardwood floor, coming from the hallway. I froze. The sound was too heavy, too real to be imagination. It moved closer, then stopped, right outside my bedroom door. Hello? My voice cracked in the dark. Nothing. Only the rain thrumming on the glass. Then, tap, tap, tap. 3 soft knocks against the door, patient, almost curious. When the power came back, the sounds stopped. The hallway was empty. But the next morning, I found something by the door. 3 small, wet footprints. Bare. Child-sized. I barely slept after that. I told myself it was nothing. Just a trick of the storm. Maybe some water leaking in. But the second night, the power went out again. At the same time. And that same scrape echoed through the hall. Only this time, I saw movement. In the reflection of the window, a faint silhouette. Not tall, not short. Just wrong. The head tilted at an impossible angle, its shape pulsing like it was breathing. When I blinked, it was gone. But when I stepped into the hall, everything was wet. The ceiling, the walls, condensation dripping down, like the house itself was sweating. Then I saw it. Water seeping out from under my bedroom door, from the inside. By the third night, exhaustion took over. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the rain again. Even if it wasn't raining. I dreamt of a dark room, flooded ankle deep. Something standing across from me in the shadows. Not moving, just watching. Its voice came through the water, garbled, whispering, "Don't sleep while it rains." I tried to wake, but my body wouldn't move. The water rose up around my neck. Then a face appeared beneath the surface. Pale, featureless, except for a smile stretched too wide. I screamed. When I finally jolted awake, I was standing in the hallway, barefoot, soaked to the knees. There were wet footprints leading back to my bedroom. That night, I decided I needed proof. I set up my phone camera facing the door. left the lights on, and tried to sleep. Around 2:14 a.m., the storm grew louder, the sound pounding like static. Through half-closed eyes, I saw the shadow return, taller this time, moving along the wall, silent except for a dripping that followed wherever it went. At sunrise, I checked the recording. At first, nothing. Then, static. Then, a blur behind the curtain. A figure leaned toward the camera, its face barely visible. It whispered something. Frame by frame, I played it back. 2 words formed on its lips. Not yet. By the 4th night, I'd given up on sleeping. I kept every light on, music blasting through my headphones. But at 3 a.m., the sound cut out. My phone went dead. The lights dimmed, the air felt thick, damp, and heavy. Then came the smell, that same rot from my dream. Wet wood, stagnant water. In the reflection of the window, I saw it again. Someone standing behind me. When I turned, no one was there. But at my feet, a puddle had formed. And on the inside of the glass, a handprint appeared, pressed from within, dripping, slowly sliding down. The storm reached its peak on the 5th night. Winds howled, thunder shook the building. The power was gone for good. I sat by the door with my flashlight, waiting for morning. Then came a single knock, loud, sharp. The sound rattled the doorframe. And then a voice, calm, familiar, my own. Let me in. My throat went dry. The voice came again, quieter, pleading. Please, I can't sleep out here. I reached for the doorknob. It was freezing cold. The flashlight flickered, and for a split second, I saw it through the peephole. A shadow made of water, trembling in the stormlight. I screamed and backed away. The knocking stopped, and just like that, everything went silent. By morning, the sky was clear. The storm had passed. But when I checked my camera, it had recorded one final clip. A whisper from the dark. You slept while it rained. Now I can too. I moved out a week later. But no matter where I go, the sound follows. When the rain hits the glass just right, I hear it. A faint knocking. 3 times. Then silence. And sometimes, if I listen too closely, I hear a voice behind it. Soft, wet, familiar. Don't close your eyes. They say old houses creak because they remember every footstep, every whisper, every moment of fear. But what if a house doesn't just remember you? What if it refuses to let you go? I found out the hard way when my fiancée Claire and I discovered the McCarthy House, a sprawling Victorian hidden deep in the Oregon countryside behind a dense canopy of oaks and perpetual fog. It was cheap, suspiciously cheap, but we convinced ourselves that it only needed work. The real estate agent, strangely relieved when we signed, handed us the keys and whispered, Once you move in, don't leave at night." We laughed it off, thinking it was superstition, unaware of how literal her words would become. From the moment we arrived, the house groaned like something alive. Rain tapped violently against the wide porch and curled the edges of old wallpaper inside, while fireplaces and antique furniture lent the place a grim, haunting charm. That first night, the house seemed peaceful enough, the sound of rain a lullaby. Until around 2 a.m., I woke to a clicking sound, sharper than the settling of old wood. Like fingernails scraping glass, it came from the window beside our bed. When I switched on the lamp, the sound stopped. Outside, I glimpsed a pale face in the reflection. My own, I assumed, until it blinked. Heart racing, I yanked the curtains shut and woke Claire. But when she looked, there was nothing. Only rain. The next morning brought more unsettling discoveries. The front door stood wide open, though I was sure I'd locked it, and muddy, bare footprints led down the hall. They were too small to belong to either of us. When we tried to leave for town, the door wouldn't budge. Not locked, just impossible to open, as if the wood itself resisted us. Every other exit behaved the same. Inward opening, trapping us inside. Trying to distract ourselves, we explored the attic and found a dusty trunk filled with photographs, hundreds of them, all of families standing in front of the same house, their faces blurred, distorted, smeared as if dragged through ink. One image stopped me cold. It depicted our living room, identical in every detail, except in the photo, two figures, a man and a woman, stood by the window, faces that looked exactly like ours. That night, the house became actively malevolent. Movement echoed downstairs, a dragging sound through the floorboards. Flashlights in hand, we crept into the living room, only to find every piece of furniture arranged to face the front door, as though the house were waiting for someone to arrive. The grandfather clock struck 3, though it had no pendulum or mechanism, and deep within the walls came a muffled knock. 3 times, then a whisper, "Stay." By the 3rd day, the storm worsened, cutting out all power. Every hallway seemed longer, rooms subtly rearranged. Claire panicked at the window, screaming for help, and froze. Outside, among the rain-soaked trees, stood dozens of pale figures, men, women, and children, staring at us. Their faces mirrored the photographs. When I blinked, they vanished, leaving wet handprints smeared across the glass. Desperate, we tried the cellar, which had always been stuck. That night, it swung open. Cold, damp air carrying the stench of rot and rusted metal surged past us. In the far corner, an iron door, chained and ominous, emitted faint knocking from within. We fled, only to find the kitchen door slam shut behind us, cracking the frame. The house spoke next, in whispers that grew louder each night, repeating one phrase over and over. No one leaves. The wallpaper bubbled. Water seeped from the ceiling. Though the storm had ended, the clock struck 3, always 3, as the air grew heavy, almost alive, as if the house were breathing alongside us. By morning, we'd had enough. We smashed the windows, but the glass warped and flexed, almost alive. The front door creaked open on its own. Outside lay the familiar porch, the road, the forest, yet darker, distorted. When we stepped out, we found ourselves back in the living room. That's when Claire screamed. The photographs had changed. Every image now depicted us, trapped inside, staring through the windows. Weeks later, the storm still never stopped. The clocks no longer moved. The windows showed only rain. Upstairs, new voices, laughing, arguing, moving furniture, reminded me that the house feeds on its guests. It hangs their images on the walls, patiently waiting for the next family to sign the lease. So if you ever see a listing for an old Victorian on Oak Hollow or Ridge Lane, cheap, charming, and ready for new memories, don't sign. Some houses don't want owners. They want company. You can always tell when a storm isn't just weather. The wind moves wrong. The lightning feels personal, like it's searching for someone. That night, it was looking for me. It was around midnight when the power went out. I'd been dozing on the couch, half listening to the wind clawing at the shutters, when everything went dark. Just me, the sound of rain hammering the windows, and the faint blue glow of my phone screen. Normally, I wouldn't have cared. Storms were common out here in rural Maine. But this one felt, at first, I thought it might be my neighbor, Old Man Collins, checking in. But when I peered through the peephole, I saw someone else. A man stood on the porch, drenched in rain, wearing a soaked trench coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. He wasn't shivering, wasn't shielding himself, just standing there, completely still. "You all right out there?" I called. No answer. "Do you need help?" Slowly, he tilted his head upward. That's when I realized he wasn't even facing the door. He was facing the window beside it, the one right next to my eye, and he was staring directly at me. I stumbled back from the door, heart pounding. Then came the knocking again, harder this time, sharp and impatient. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but there was no signal, just static. When I looked back through the peephole, the porch was empty. Rain poured across the steps, lightning flashing white against the darkness. I waited, listening to the wind, telling myself it was over. Maybe a traveler, maybe someone lost. But just as my breathing began to steady, there came another knock, this time from the back door. The kitchen was pitch black, except for the bursts of lightning outside. I moved slowly, flashlight trembling in my hand, every step echoing in the silence. The door rattled in its frame with every gust of wind. "Who's there?" I called. No answer. Just the sound of rain and breathing. Not mine. I swept the flashlight across the room and froze. Wet footprints, bare feet. They started at the door and ended behind the kitchen island. My throat went dry. I raised the light and caught the faint outline of a man crouched low behind the counter, water dripping from his coat. Before I could react, the power flickered back on, and he was gone. I ran to my phone again, desperate for help, and finally caught one bar of service. The call connected, but the voice that answered wasn't the dispatcher. It was mine. My own voice whispered through the static, calm and broken. Don't open the door. Then the line went dead. I tried, locking every door and window, but the house itself felt wrong. My reflections weren't right. Not in the mirror, not in the darkened TV screen. Every pane of glass showed movement behind me, though nothing was there when I turned. In the hallway mirror, I saw him clearly for the first time. The man in the coat. His face was pale and featureless until the next flash of lightning revealed the truth. It wasn't a stranger's face at all. It was mine. Warped, stretched, smiling. The knocking came again, not from one door, but from everywhere. Walls, windows, floors, a rhythmic pounding that shook the whole house. Beneath it, I could hear my name being whispered, over and over, faster and louder, until it became something else. A distorted, droning noise that filled the air. The lights flickered violently, and for a split second, I saw him standing behind me again, dripping, faceless, silent. I turned to the security system, hoping for proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The footage showed me asleep on the couch, then standing, walking to the door and opening it, letting someone in. But I never moved. I was still sitting there the entire time. The video ended with both of us, the man and me, standing face to face in the living room, before the feed cut to static. By morning, the storm had stopped. Sunlight poured through the curtains, soft and warm. And for a moment, everything looked normal, peaceful even, until I noticed it. A second coat hanging by the door, a soaked, mud-streaked trench coat, and wet footprints leading from the front door, down the hall, straight into my bedroom. When I turned toward the mirror, I didn't see my reflection anymore. Just the man in the hat, staring back at me, smiling with my face. They say there's a sound that never leaves your head once you've heard it. For some, it's the echo of someone screaming. For me, it's the sound of rain hitting glass. Endless, steady, and wrong. Because where I was, the rain never stopped. Not once. It began as a simple real estate job. I was sent to evaluate an old house just outside the town of Ashmere, a place the locals called the Grey Hollow. The last family who'd lived there had vanished 15 years ago, But somehow, the property still stood in perfect condition. Too perfect. The road there was barely passable, swallowed by moss and wet leaves that stuck to my tires like glue. It was raining, of course, not just a drizzle. Sheets of water so thick, it felt like the world outside my windshield had sunk underwater. By the time I arrived, the house was just a faint silhouette in the mist. When I stepped out of the car, I noticed something strange. The sound of the rain didn't match the drops hitting the ground. It was louder, deeper, like it was coming from inside the house. The front door creaked open on its own, as if it had been waiting. Inside, everything was immaculate. No dust, no cobwebs, nothing out of place. Yet every surface was soaked. The carpet squished beneath my boots. The furniture glistened, as if freshly polished, but slick with moisture. And yet, there were no leaks. The windows were fogged from the inside, dripping like the weather itself had been trapped within the walls. On the wall, near the staircase, hung a single framed photo. A family of 4, smiling stiffly at the camera. A mother, a father, and 2 young daughters. But their eyes looked wrong. Not glowing, not monstrous, just blurred. Like the rain had begun inside the photograph. I tried to wipe the frame clean, but when I pulled my hand away, it was wet, covered in condensation. I started my report, pacing from room to room, trying to stay professional. Every step made a wet squelch. Every breath reeked of mildew and copper. And the deeper I went, the louder the rain became. It stopped sounding like weather. It had rhythm, a pulse, almost like breathing. Upstairs, only one door was open. A faint light flickered within. Inside was a child's bedroom. Wallpaper faded, but the walls covered in drawings. Dozens of them. Each one showed the same scene. A tall, faceless figure standing in the rain, holding the hand of a little girl with yellow hair. Behind me, I heard a soft step, bare feet on wet carpet. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely steady. A small, muffled voice answered, "Don't let him in." I froze. The room was empty. Then I noticed the closet door, slightly ajar. Inside, a single handprint marked the wood. Small, wet, fresh. The light flickered again, and for a second I saw her. A girl, maybe 7 years old, standing in the corner, soaked to the skin. Her blonde hair clung to her cheeks as she pointed toward the window. "It's starting again," she whispered. And then she was gone. The rain outside pounded harder, shaking the glass. Through the blur of water, I saw someone standing at the edge of the yard. A tall shadow, motionless despite the wind. When the lightning flashed, it moved closer. One flash, by the tree line. Another, halfway to the porch. Then, suddenly, right outside the window. The glass trembled under the impact of the rain, a crack snaking across the pane. And then I heard it, a voice, calm, Low. Let me in. It's raining. The lights flickered and went out completely. The only sound was the storm. From somewhere below came a slow, hollow dripping. I followed it down to the basement, my flashlight beam shaking in the dark. The air grew colder with every step. The walls shimmered with wet stains that glistened like oil. At the bottom of the stairs, water pooled around my ankles. In the center of the room stood a table. On it, a glass jar filled with murky water. Inside the jar floated a single iron key. A note beside it read, "Only open when it rains." Behind me, something splashed. I turned slowly and saw him. Halfway up the stairs stood a tall, skeletal man, water streaming from his body, as though he'd been soaking in it for years. His eyes glowed faintly blue beneath matted hair, and when he opened his mouth, water poured out in a slow, steady stream. The sound wasn't thunder anymore. It was him. The rain was coming from inside him. I stumbled back, clutching the jar. The water around me rose fast, knee-deep, waist-deep, rising faster than I could breathe. I smashed the jar open, grabbed the key, and ran. The only door left was the attic. The key turned easily. Inside, the sound of rain was deafening. But it wasn't falling through the roof. It was falling from it. A thin curtain of water poured constantly from the ceiling, pooling on the floor where something lay. A body. No, not a body. A reflection. It was me. But it wasn't copying my movements anymore. It stood up on its own, dripping, whispering in a warped, wet version of my own voice. You shouldn't have opened it. Now the rain knows your name. I don't remember leaving the house. 1 second I was running through the hall, and the next I was in my car, tires spinning through the mud. I didn't look back until I hit the main road. The moment I left the property line, the rain stopped. Instantly. The silence was deafening. I thought it was over. Until that night, when I got home, hundreds of miles away, and heard the faint sound of dripping in my living room. There was no leak, just a small puddle forming under the couch, and on the window above it, a single wet handprint. Outside, the stars were clear, no clouds, no storm, but inside, the water kept falling, drop by drop. When I tried to wipe the window clean, a whisper came from the glass, soft, familiar, and patient. Let me in. It's raining. You ever answer a ringing phone when you know no one should be calling? That sound, sharp, hollow, too loud in an empty place, can make your heart stop, especially when the line shouldn't even exist anymore. That's what happened to me at the old Silver Pines Motel, and I wish to God I'd let it keep ringing. I wasn't there for pleasure. I worked for the county, surveying old properties before demolition. Silver Pines had been abandoned since 1998. After a series of strange incidents, 3 disappearances, 2 suicides, and 1 fire that for some reason never spread beyond room 9. When I pulled off the highway, the sky was bleeding orange, the dying sunset smothered by low clouds. The motel sign still flickered faintly. Silver Pines, vacancy. Half the letters were gone, buzzing weakly in the wind, like the place itself was on life support. The main office smelled of mildew and rot. The carpet was half eaten by mold. An old rotary phone sat on the front desk, buried beneath dust and grime. It had been disconnected years ago. Or so I thought. I started photographing each building, jotting down notes for the report. The rooms were nearly identical. Peeling wallpaper, broken glass, the faint stench of something that had once been alive. Then I reached room 9. The door hung slightly open. The number burned halfway off the wood. Inside, the air was different. Warm, thick, humid, like someone had just been there. I took a step inside, and that's when I heard it. Ring. It echoed through the hall, sharp and jarring, cutting through the silence like a blade. Once, twice, 3 times. My chest tightened. The front office was at least 50 feet away, yet the sound was impossibly clear. That old rotary phone was ringing again. I walked back, slowly. The receiver sat off the hook, the cord still tangled around its base. But it was ringing. Against all logic, against every bit of dead wiring in that building, it was ringing. I don't know why I did it, but I picked it up. Static filled my ear. Then a voice. Room 9. That's all it said. Calm, male, like he was standing right outside the window. "Who is this?" I asked. There was silence. Then the faint sound of dripping water. A whisper followed. "You're late." And the line went dead. I should have left right then. But curiosity, or maybe denial, pulled me back toward room 9. When I entered, the air had changed again. The smell of ozone and iron filled the room, sharp and metallic. The bedspread was drenched, soaked through as though water had been poured directly onto it. And on the nightstand sat another phone, another rotary model, softly ringing. It shouldn't have been possible. There were no power lines, no connection. Just that faint, eerie blue glow pulsing from within the dial. I lifted the receiver. This time, I heard breathing, slow and trembling. Then a woman's voice whispered, "Don't check out." The line hissed violently, and I dropped the phone in shock. In the back office, I found a guest ledger covered in mildew and dust. The last entry was dated August 12th, 1998. Every name after that had been scribbled out, except the final one. Daniel Graves, room 9, paid in cash. The name made my blood run cold. That was my father's name. He'd vanished that same year. His car found abandoned off Route 11. I flipped the page, my hands shaking. Beneath the signature, in different handwriting, someone had written, "Checkout denied." The floor creaked behind me. I turned, and the walls began to bleed. Thin streams of water trickled down the wallpaper, spreading into the carpet. It wasn't rain. It was pouring out of the walls. I stumbled toward the hall, but every door I passed was wrong. The numbers were repeating. Room 9, again and again, looping endlessly. Then the phones started ringing. All of them. Every room at once. The air filled with shrill, overlapping tones that echoed like screams. Amid the chaos, his voice returned. That same calm, steady tone from before. "Check in. We've been waiting for you." The hallway stretched endlessly, the walls pulsing like veins. Water climbed higher, ankles, knees, chest, until I could barely move. The light flickered, and then everything went black. When I woke, I was lying half submerged in the water inside room 9. The phone floated beside me. I picked up the receiver. Static hissed softly, followed by a faint whisper. "Dad?" The voice was mine. Younger, terrified. Then another voice overlapped it, my father's. "Stay in your room. It's safer when it rains." And the line went silent. I ran for the door, but the knob spun endlessly beneath my hand. It wouldn't open. Lightning flashed outside, and for a brief second, I saw the parking lot. Dozens of figures stood ankle-deep in water, motionless. Every one of them was holding a phone to their ear, listening. The lights died, leaving only the soft blue glow from the rotary dial. It began to spin on its own, the numbers clicking one by one. Then the receiver lifted slightly, as if an unseen hand were holding it. A final voice whispered, "Welcome back, Daniel. Room 9 has been waiting." They found me the next morning, standing outside the broken motel sign, drenched to the bone, still holding the receiver from the front desk. The demolition crew confirmed the line had been dead for over 20 years. They tore the place down later that week. But sometimes, when I drive past that stretch of highway, my radio crackles, just for a moment, and I hear the faint ringing of a phone. Always 3 times, never 4. And once, through the static, I swear I heard a voice say, "Room 9 is ready for you." They say every traveler leaves behind a shadow. But what happens when the shadow decides to stay? It was a night like any other, until the reflection in the bus window smiled back, and I realized I wasn't smiling. It was almost midnight when I caught the last bus out of Seattle. I'd missed my earlier ride home after a late shift, and I didn't feel like paying for a motel. The station was empty, all fluorescent lights and the stale smell of coffee. The bus rolled up with a wheeze of brakes and a flicker of headlights. Route 107, straight through the mountains to Ridgeway. The driver barely nodded as I stepped on, his gaze lingering longer than felt natural. Only 4 other passengers occupied the dim cabin. A man in a raincoat near the back, a woman clutching a child's doll, and two teens asleep against the windows. I slid into the middle row, pressed my backpack against the seat, and leaned toward the glass. My reflection stared back at me, but something was off. Its eyes were wide, unblinking, and when I blinked, it didn't. At first, I brushed it off. Flickering lights, rain pounding the road, exhaustion. But 30 minutes in, the reflection started to glitch. Every time the bus passed under a streetlight, it flickered, and in that split second, wasn't me anymore. It was darker, thinner, its head tilted toward me, as if watching. No one else noticed. The woman with the doll murmured to herself. The man in the raincoat stared ahead, still and silent. Even the driver's silhouette seemed stiff, unmoving. Then I caught the rearview mirror. That same dark figure mirrored my position, smiling. I tried to ignore it, plugging my earbuds in and closing my eyes. But the whisper came again, faint, almost drowned by the hum of the engine. "Do you see me now?" It wasn't in my headphones. It came from the window. I leaned forward, fogging the glass with my breath. Outside, only the reflection of bus lights sliding across the wet load appeared. Then lightning struck. For an instant, I saw it. A second face pressed against the outside of the glass. Pale, empty-eyed, mouth unnaturally wide. It whispered, "Next stop." I stumbled forward, shouting at the driver to stop. He didn't move. His eyes were glassy, unseeing, hands locked on the wheel, the bus still moving. I reached for the brake, but a voice froze me in place. "Sit down." Behind me, the man in the raincoat had stood up, head tilted unnaturally, his face stretched, hollow, wet. "Don't get off yet," he murmured. "You're not supposed to." When I finally dared to look out the window again, we were no longer on the highway. The road narrowed, flanked by dense trees. No signs, no lights, just darkness. Then the bus slowed. Through the rain, a faint glow appeared ahead. An old roadside stop, its sign barely legible through fog. Pine Hollow Station. I looked back at the reflection. It smiled, wide, knowing. When the bus stopped, it spoke. "You made it home." The doors hissed open. Nobody moved. The woman with the doll stared forward. The teens remained slumped in their seats. The man in the raincoat stepped off silently. I hesitated, gripping my bag. Outside, rain fell in sheets. The driver still didn't move. Then, in the rearview mirror, I realized there was no reflection behind me, only empty seats. I stepped off. The air smelled of wet earth and rust. The station was silent, except for the flicker of one failing streetlight. When I looked back, the bus doors were closing. The driver's pale face caught the light for a moment. His mouth moved. "See you on the way back?" Then the bus vanished into the dark. The station shelter was crumbling, peeling posters, a cracked clock stuck at 3:17. No cars, no people, only the rain. A fogged phone booth stood by the corner. I wiped the glass and froze. My reflection wasn't staring back. It was behind me, head tilted the same way, smiling wider than ever. Then the payphone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed unnaturally. I lifted the receiver, hands trembling, and a whisper seeped through. "You're late." I dropped the phone and spun to run. Behind me, the road was gone, replaced by endless rows of empty bus seats stretching into fog. Each one held a reflection of me, silent, grinning, watching. Above it all, the whisper came again. "Everyone gets a seat eventually." The next thing I remember, daylight streamed through the windows of a regular bus. The driver hummed softly. Passengers chatted, phones buzzed. Everything looked normal. Until I glanced at my reflection in the glass. It smiled, but I didn't. That was 3 months ago. Now, whenever I ride a bus, any bus, I see it again. A faint, shadowy outline in the window seat, across from me. Always smiling, always waiting, and sometimes, when the driver isn't looking, the radio crackles, and I hear the whisper above my head. Next stop, Pine Hollow. It was one of those nights when the rain sounds like static, steady, endless, drowning out everything else. I remember staring at my ceiling, trying to fall asleep, when my phone lit up on the nightstand. Unknown number. The time was 3:03 a.m. Normally, I'd let it ring, but something about the sound that night, slow, hollow, like it came from underwater. But as I got ready for work, I noticed scratches on my bedroom window. Thin, straight lines etched from the outside on the second floor, with no way to reach them. And at the corner, a faint smear. 3:03. That night, I couldn't sleep again, leaving the TV on for background noise. When the clock struck 3:03 a.m., my phone rang again. Same unknown number, same vibration. I answered, and the voice whispered, "Look outside." Rain streaked the glass, and through it, I saw a shape at the edge of the yard, unmoving, staring at my window. Then the call ended. Half convinced I was imagining it, I called the sheriff. Officer Rowan came, but dismissed it, saying the scratches could be tree branches, yet no trees could reach that window. Later, I checked the street camera footage. Exactly at 3:03 a.m., a human silhouette appeared outside my house for a single frame, facing up toward my window, then vanished. When it rang at 3:03, I answered, only to hear a voice close, almost behind me. "You shouldn't have answered." It echoed faintly from the closet. The door cracked an inch, shifted, and inside, something glinted. I flung my lamp toward it. The bulb shattered. In the faint glow of my phone, I saw a pale shape crawling out, hands bending wrong, its face too smooth, with a faint red glow. My number, flickering on the phone screen. I ran, barefoot, through the rain, clutching my phone as the ring followed me, bouncing off trees, asphalt, even thunder. I reached a diner, soaked and shaking, and my phone buzzed. A voicemail from 3:03 a.m. Static, then a voice. "You shouldn't have run." Followed by slow, wet breathing, and another whisper. "She's still listening." The timestamp ominously read, "Tomorrow, 3:03 a.m. I changed my number, moved apartments, got a new phone. For a while, it was quiet. Until last night, driving home in the rain, my car radio crackled, and the voice said, "You changed your number, but I didn't." The dashboard clock read 3:03 a.m. My phone lit up. Unknown number. Incoming call. I answered. The voice whispered, "Open your rear-view mirror." 2 days later, cops found my car, engine running, doors locked from inside, my phone cracked and water damaged. But the call log remained. 3:03 a.m. Incoming call. Duration 066. Phones don't log that. Yet every night since, at 3:03 a.m., a faint ring echoes through my new apartment, even with the phone off. And sometimes, just before it fades, I hear my own voice whisper back, "Don't go back to sleep. ... I've lived in this apartment for almost 4 years. It's not much. Cracked walls, flickering hallway lights, the constant hum of the radiator, but it's cheap and quiet. At least it was quiet, until 3 weeks ago, when she started standing outside my window. It was a Thursday, one of those restless, humid nights where the rain clings to the air but never falls, and I had fallen asleep on the couch, watching TV, when around 2:47 a.m., a soft tapping woke me. Tap, tap, tap. At first, I thought it was the hallway, then realized it was right behind me, on the window. I turned slowly. The curtains were half open, and through the glass, a pale face stared in. Grayish skin slick with condensation, dark hair plastered to the sides, eyes wide and unblinking, reflective, like glass marbles catching streetlight. I froze. We stared at each other. Then she smiled, a twitching smile that didn't reach her eyes, pressed her palm against the glass, leaving a wet print, and vanished. The next morning, the handprint was inside the glass, unremovable, faint streaks shimmering beneath it like vein-like roots. 2 nights later, I ran into my neighbor, Mrs. Crane, who told me about Mara Ellis, a tenant from an old boarding house that once stood on the lot, who jumped after her husband disappeared during a storm, and how she sometimes walks through the glass when it rains. That night, I didn't look at the window, but at 3:00 a.m., tapping returned, followed by a soft voice. "Let me in, please. It's cold." I couldn't resist and peered through the curtain. Her face was pressed against the glass, nose flattened, mouth smeared, and her teeth were shards of jagged glass. The next day, I set my phone to record the window. Hours of nothing. Then at 2:59 a.m., a shape formed in the reflection. Not outside, but behind me. And at 3:03, the microphone picked up a faint whisper. She's not outside anymore. The footage corrupted itself. Sleep deprived, I covered the window completely with garbage bags, nailed it shut, pushed a bookshelf against it, and finally felt some relief. Until, in the bathroom mirror, I saw her, dripping, smiling, and when I turned, nothing but words appeared in the condensation. You moved the window. On the third night, power went out around 3:10 a.m. The apartment plunged into darkness, and I heard water dripping. The window I had sealed leaked dark water across the floor, and behind the bookshelf, something pushed, nails groaning, wood splintering, and a muffled whisper. Let me back in. You left it open. When the police arrived, they found me outside, barefoot in the rain. Inside was soaked with no leaks. The bookshelf split in half, and the glass window gone, vanished. My neighbor upstairs had also filed a complaint of someone standing outside her window, looking down at mine. I moved 2 states away, got a new apartment with no street-facing windows, and felt safe until last night, when rain returned, and I awoke to tapping, not on glass this time, but on the mirror. Tap, tap. I wiped the fog away, and her face was there, closer than before, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. You can't move the rain. I used to think silence was peaceful, that it meant safety. But after what happened in that house, I know now that silence only means they're listening. It was supposed to be a fresh start. After my divorce, I rented a small old house on the outskirts of town. Cheap, surrounded by pine trees that blocked out the world, supposedly unoccupied for 20 years. The day I moved in, the air felt stale, like it had been holding its breath, and for a moment, I thought I heard something faint from above, a low murmur, too quiet to make out, but I ignored it, telling myself it was the wind. Around 2:30 a.m., the first night, rain began to fall as I drifted to sleep, only to be jolted awake by creaking footsteps above my room, pacing back and forth, despite no attic access in the bedroom, and a low, shaky whisper. Don't open it. The next morning, I saw deep scratches etched across the ceiling around the attic hatch, long grooves like claws. And when I pulled down the ladder, the smell of mildew, rot, and rust hit me first, while a small, bare footprint lay in the dust, too small for an adult, too fresh to be decades old. By the third night, the whispers had grown louder, coming from the attic and the walls, like a conversation just beyond hearing. So So I set up a tape recorder beneath the hatch. And the next morning, amidst static and rain, I heard my own voice saying, "Who's there?" And later, the mailman warned me I was renting the old Henderson place, where the family of 4 vanished in 1987, leaving dinner on the table, candles burned down, and neighbors reporting whispers from the attic for months afterward. That evening, I climbed up again, flashlight shaking, and found a wooden trunk I hadn't noticed before, filled with broken toys and a photograph of the family. But behind them, in the window, a 5th figure stood in the attic, staring. That night, I tried to ignore the attic, sealing the hatch and blocking it with a dresser. But around 3 a.m., dragging sounds above me returned, followed by whispers growing louder. "Come back up. We're cold. You promised." The ladder rattled, dust fell, and through the gap, I saw dozens of glowing eyes staring down at me. I bolted barefoot into the rain, hearing the attic hatch slam open behind me, and shadows moving fast along the walls as I fled, leaving everything behind. 2 weeks later, the house was rented again, a young couple with a child, and the realtor laughed when I warned her, noting that the husband had already heard little footsteps upstairs. Now, every time it rains, I swear I can still hear that faint, static hum from the old tape recorder, and the whisper through the noise, "Don't open it again." They say some rooms in old houses are better left alone. I never believed it. Not until I moved into my grandmother's house, the one at the edge of Oak Hollow Road, where the rain never seemed to stop. Grandma had passed away a month before, leaving me her 2-story wooden home deep in the Oregon woods. I hadn't been inside since I was a child, but the moment I stepped through that creaking front door, I felt it, a heaviness that hung in the air. The house smelled of mildew and damp wood, and every step I took echoed like a warning. Outside, the rain streamed down the windows in thick, glassy veins, while the wind pressed against the walls with a slow, ghostly persistence. It didn't take long for the memory to return. The locked room at the end of the hall, the one Grandma never allowed anyone to enter. I remembered asking her why when I was 7, and her soft reply had always unsettled me. Some rooms don't belong to us. They belong to the rain. That evening, lightning lit the hallway in harsh flashes, and that's when I saw it. An old iron key resting on the table beneath the window. It was the same key Grandma always wore around her neck, the one she swore she'd be buried with. I picked it up, startled by how cold and wet it felt, as if it had just come in from the storm. My curiosity was stronger than my fear, so I walked to the swollen gray door at the end of the hall and slid the key into the lock. It turned easily. The door opened with a long, shuddering sigh, and the smell that spilled out hit me like a wave. Rot, mold, and something faintly metallic, like copper or blood. The walls were black with water damage, wallpaper peeling in long strips like shedding skin. In the center of the room stood an iron bed frame beneath a cracked window, and on it lay a single object, a small leather-bound notebook. I approached, the floorboards groaning under my weight, and opened it. The handwriting was Grandma's. The entries were short and frantic. He knocks when it rains. He asks to be let in. If I answer, he'll remember my voice. Another line read, "He's patient. The rain feeds him, keeps him alive. And then, if you open the door during a storm, he'll think you're calling him back." A drop of water hit the floor behind me. I turned slowly. The ceiling was dry, but a small puddle glistened at my feet. And then came 3 slow knocks from inside the wall. Abruptly. They were steady and deliberate. I froze. The air around me turned icy as frost bloomed along the inside of the window. My voice shook as I whispered, "Hello?" The knocks answered, twice, closer, louder. Water began seeping down the walls in thin streams, and through that wet silence came a hoarse voice, faint and bubbling, as if rising through water. "Please, open." My hands trembled. I backed away, slammed the door, and locked it again. On the other side came one final sound. A dragging noise, slow and heavy, followed by a whisper, so close it felt like breath against my ear. "You already did." That night, the storm raged without mercy. Sheets of rain pounded the roof and windows, every creak in the house sounding like footsteps, every drip a knock on my sanity. Around 3 a.m., I saw it, a dark streak of water sliding from beneath the locked room, spreading down the hall like a living vein. I should have run then, but something made me reach for the handle. It was hot, burning, almost alive, and as steam hissed from where my fingers touched the metal, the knocking began again. 3 times, then faster, then furious. The whole house trembled. Windows rattled in their frames as a deep, rhythmic sound filled the air, like a heartbeat pulsing through the walls. And beneath it, that same wet, rasping voice rose once more. "Let me in. It's raining." I ran. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, and out into the storm. The rain felt thick, heavy, almost solid as it drenched me to the bone. Behind me, every light in the house flickered wildly. From the upstairs window, the locked room, I saw something move. A shape, a silhouette standing there, staring down at me. I didn't stop running until my legs gave out at the edge of the woods. I didn't look back. A month later, I sold the house to a restoration company. I never told them about the key, the voice, or the room that belonged to the rain. A week after the sale, one of the contractors emailed me. He said the ceiling above that room had collapsed during another storm, and when they tore it open, they found an iron bed frame embedded between the beams, and beneath it, bones, human bones. The skull was facing upward, directly beneath a hole in the roof, as if watching the sky. His last line chilled me to the core. There were water stains all around the remains, except one spot. A perfect handprint, pressed into the wood, completely dry. Now, whenever it rains, I can't sleep. Because through the sound of water beating against the windows, I still hear that knock sometimes. Soft, patient, 3 times, and the whisper that follows, gentle and wet. You kept your promise. You opened it.